Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another video around One Identity Manager scripting. In this small sub-series, I like to show you something about value templates. Remember, value templates are the code snippets in Identity Manager that allow us to direct the data flow between different tables and different properties. This sub-series is divided into two parts. In the first part, I will answer some questions around templates to repeat known knowledge around templates and how they work. And in the second part, I will show you a lot of different code snippets and especially code that is typically used only in templates. Have fun with that video series and let's start now. My first question should be, what is a template? A template or a value template, it's a piece of code and it could be defined per column. Please remember, in Identity Manager are around about 11,000 columns or more, and each of them could have a template assigned. The good message is, out of the box, it is only a few of columns that comes with a template. The idea of a template is to generate data, that means to generate a value for a specific property based on other data. Typical example, it's the display name. The display name typically gets generated out of first name and last name on a person object. And so a template for the display name will concatenate these two strings together. Maybe last name, comma, first name. Templates as well works pretty good cross-table references. That means, for example, if there is a surname on Active Directory account, because we are talking about identity management, this last name, that means this surname, should be born out of the last name on the person object, because the person object has the identity data. So there will be a template on surname referencing the column on the person object which is related to this specific Active Directory account. Templates are there to direct the data flow between the different tables in the Identity Manager. Why we need templates? In other products, a lot of intelligence is implemented in a synchronization agent. That means synchronization agent takes data out of a target system, they just generate new data on the basis of some implemented rules, and they store this data then later on in related data objects in a data store, like an LDAP or a database. In Identity Manager, we try to keep these agents thumb. That means they just have to take data from the outer side and to copy it or to synchronize it to the inner side. All the other intelligence, that means every data calculation or generation, happens in the Identity Manager database with the help, for example, of templates. The reason for that is it is easy to maintain. That means if I like to change the behavior of something, I have to go into my tools and there I have not to modify a synchronization agent, I just can modify on the basis of the specific data structure where I want to change something, a template that represents a value for this specific column I like to modify. It is easy to use at the end, and that is the reason why we implemented that since years into our product. With that, these templates are just directing the data flow between one object and another object in the Identity Manager. And if I use these templates, for example, if I change the last name on a person object, this could have a big effect on a lot of other objects, like for example the account objects. Remember, we want to change the identity, for example, changing the last name because a person got married, and then at the end, we hope that all of these accounts will change their last names as well. This happens with the help of templates in Identity Manager, and this is the reason why we have to know something about it. How a template works. As we mentioned before, a template itself is calculating values based on some other existing values. For example, the display name of a person object gets generated out of first name and last name. Therefore, the template has to reference the first name and the last name. This is the first step in using templates. These templates referencing other columns. Then there are some calculation processes, and at the end I get a calculated value for my display name. This is the first part, how a template works. The second part is that we have to figure out when a template gets triggered. And this is a little bit different as you may think. Template itself gets calculated if a referenced value, which is referenced in this template, will get modified. That means There is a last name referenced in the display name of a person object, and if I change the last name, the template gets triggered and starts calculating. The same happens as well across database references. If I modify the last name on person, automatically, because the template references that field on the Active Directory account, the surname gets recreated. This means templates will get triggered on the basis of data actions, and this is, by the way, far away from any data saving action, which happens always later. What is the overriding switch? Remember how template works. A template itself gets triggered once reference data gets modified. The overriding switch says, if it is set, that independent from every data which is in this specific field, the new calculated value will replace the field content. That means you can add manually into that field what you like. If the template gets generated, then automatically the value will be that value the template returns. Is the switch not set, that means overriding is disabled, then automatically the template will only return a calculated value if the field is empty and reference data was modified. That means the modification of our reference data stores the template, but the template will only add a value into that field if the field was empty. It is like an initial data generation. Now let's combine these two things together. First of all, there is the overriding switch set, and I want to consider now my manually input. To do that, I have to assign my manually input directly at the top of the script to a text variable. And then I can consider this text variable during the script execution and can handle my manually input during the calculation. With that, at the end of the template, I will assign the value to the field and everything looks okay. That means I am able to do everything. I can override, I cannot override, I can only initially generate, and I can consider the data that is manually inserted. What a template is used and not used for. A template is used, as we all know, to calculate values for specific columns. That means at the end there will be a text string, could be stored in a specific column as a value. Therefore, we will get data from nearly all places of the complete database, depending on the rule that is implemented in the template. With that, our template is a data generator for a specific column. Sometimes the template can as well be used, especially if we consider the manual input, to correct data. What we typically not will do with the template, and this is a rule, is to modify other columns with a template defined for a second column. That means if I have a template that calculates a value for description on person, I will make everything, but I will not make that template working in a way that it, for example, generates an account name for an Active Directory account. That means templates only modifies the column they are defined for. Technically, it is possible to handle each other object in the complete database, but the rule says don't do it. The reason for that is pretty easy. If you implement such functionality into templates, you get very fast a super complex system, could not be re-engineered, and because of that, to create or to modify other objects born out of data actions on your object you are working on, you will typically use other templates or processes. Where a template is stored. Templates are calculating values of columns, and because of that they are defined for specific columns. So it might not really surprise us that templates are stored in the table dialog column, because dialog column handles all of these different columns in the identity manager. Additionally to that, templates are VB.NET code, and as you know, VB.NET it's a compiler language. That means even if we store in dialog column the clear text of our templates, we have to ensure that later on, if something gets executed, these templates could be used. And therefore, we have to run for each template modification the compiler, because the compiler will just take the templates and will create out of this clear text stuff DLLs, and these DLLs will then after that be used from the different applications, like for example the manager, or like the web application, or like our application server, as we name that typically business logic. What happens if I change a standard template? As mentioned, out of the box, we do have standard templates. And standard templates comes with a specific standard functionality. If I want to change them, I have to go into Designer. I have just to add some code or to remove some code in my standard template, and the template is modified. Some questions out of that. First of all, what happens on a system upgrade? The good message is nothing. Your changed template will be in place. The reason for that is that only standard templates gets modified by system upgrades. Second question, can I go back to the standard template if I like to? Yes, of course, you can. The reason for that is that a standard template gets stored in a specific table, which is qbm buffer config, if it gets first time modified. That means we store the standard template. And exactly in this place, a standard template gets replaced on a system upgrade. Your modified template is, like we know, in dialog column, and in dialog column you can modify the template as many times as you like. Please note that if you modify your modified template, the first version gets stored nowhere. That means all modifications of your modified template gets forgotten. You just save your new modification. With that, we only have the original value somewhere stored, plus the last modification. If you need a little bit more versioning, for example in a project where templates very often gets changed in the initial phase, then you should work with an SVN or with a Git just to ensure that all of these different changes are somewhere stored.